Scott Mitchell here with It's My Game speaker highlights. It's My Game Kids Tennis Conference, August 14th to the 23rd. You got to register at conference.evolve9.com. It's a global virtual conference. You don't have to travel anywhere, but it's like no other conference you've ever seen. Over 20 speakers, 40 hours worth of content from amazing coaches from around the world, like the one we're about to talk to, which is Rosemary. She's the director of tennis at Kenya Tennis Association. Rosemary, welcome.
Thank you so much. Very appreciated.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. I know you're busy. I know you're out on the court and you're traveling. You do a lot. Tell us a little bit about you and what you do within your role as director of tennis.
I work with the Tennis Kenya, and I try and help coaches in their own development, as well as the development projects with the federation, from juniors to seniors as well. And then I also work as the Davis Cup captain, formerly as a Fed Cup captain, but now we have a new Fed Cup captain take over the team. So I've worked this year with the Davis Cup captain as a Davis Cup captain, rather. So
the Davis Cup captain, huh? That keeps you busy.
Let's
take a little bit of all of the stuff that you do, and maybe tell us a little bit about. You mentioned that you work with some coaches and maybe coach development. What do? Do you travel around? Is this people more on your staff, or do you try to travel around Africa and kind of spread your knowledge with a lot of different coaches?
I work as well as an educator, partially for the ITF, and helping federations in their development projects. Pretty much currently I've been working with Tanzania Tennis to help the coaches as well as the federation do the same thing that we do, something almost similar to what we do in Kenya. So we do coaching courses. A lot of stuff in this region is between beginners and intermediate. So quite a lot of what this conference is partially about. So yeah.
Yeah, so what are some of the, when you think about working with these different areas and clubs and coaches, what are some of the things that come up that you want to make sure that they're looking at when they're trying to get the beginners and intermediates involved in our game?
I feel like over the years, I would have loved to have seen a lot more boys and girls training together, working together, because the feeling that boys and girls are so different at that age, between the age of 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, even 11, it doesn't really come out like the differences are that many. And yet we feel like they need to train separately, they're treated differently. And it's important that we understand the reasons why we should treat them differently to help them be at the best individually, and not necessarily that sport is for boys and then certain sports are for girls and certain sports are for boys. So generally, not just in tennis, as development for young kids, it would be important to have it a lot more holistic. So coaches understanding what makes girls tick and what makes boys tick, I think, is very important.
Yeah, and I think that's something that, at least in the United States for sure, but it seems like around the world, coaches need to know more of, right? So when you think about boys and girls, obviously they develop a little bit differently at different rates and different speeds, but also what motivates them and what brings them to different sports is also a factor, right? So what do you find when it comes to the motivation piece of it that's so different between boys and girls?
Well, I feel like communication between them is probably how you communicate with them, what you present to them. Let's say, for example, when a child is born, we conclude that the toys that we give to boys and the toys that we give to girls are different. Now, I'd like to look at a scenario where we buy them the same toys. For example, we buy a football for a girl just as much as we buy a football for a boy. What this will help us do is, if we buy sports toys for girls just like we do for boys, they will help the fundamental developments. By the time they're at the age of 8 to 10, they already have the basics of athleticism. And this is something that lacks a lot. And then we end up with girls at the age of 8, 9, 10 who've not really played a lot. And this is why we normally tend to feel like the differences are that big. But what if we did things differently? What if we started at an early age to expose girls to sports as much as we do to young boys? So that's just what I think at the moment.
And are you doing some of that research down there where you are and within the federations, or is that just something that's on your bucket list to check off and get going?
It's part of a study that I'm trying to work on now. I'm trying to do my master's, and it's more on gender differences, not necessarily just in for the young children, but it's overall, even women. Why are there more men in sports than women? Why are there more male coaches than female coaches? And I feel like to get those answers, we have to start from the bottom, which is why this conference is amazing. It's a good place to start to understand why, as we get older, the differences become a lot bigger, a lot more than it actually should. There will always be differences, especially because men are built differently from women. I mean, testosterone, all that stuff. But the differences and the gaps can be smaller if we start things differently from the beginning.
Right.
Yeah.
That's great, great insight. And it kind of leads, and I want to come back to some of the other things that you do within your career. But before we do that, let's go ahead and talk a little bit about your presentation, because what you're talking about right now feeds perfectly into that. And I believe the presentation title, unless you want to change it, is "It's Not All Pink and Blue, Understanding the Needs of Girls and Boys." So without giving away secrets, what are some of the things that coaches are going to take away from your presentation?
It's probably the big questions of if boys and girls played and did things together from when they're born. So for example, you buy a tennis ball and a racket as a present at a baby shower. When you know that it's a boy, then you probably should buy a soccer ball, tennis ball, and a racket when you know that it's a girl, rather than just a Cinderella, those cute little things to get ready for one sport or another. Yes, and we are the reason why when somebody says that I have a kid who plays soccer and a kid who plays who does gymnastics, then the mentality is that the kid who plays soccer is a boy and the gymnastics kid is a girl, So in understanding these two things, it can help us communicate better with kids to keep the girls enjoying themselves a bit better, understanding what you need to do better in your sessions to communicate with girls and keep them in the sport for longer instead of the dropouts, the number of dropouts that we have with girls, for example. Those are pretty much the things that we're going to try and look at. I'm trying so hard not to.
I know it's tough. So, yeah. I think one of the things that we see in the United States for sure, and again, it sounds very similar like what you're seeing, is we are seeing, the girls dropping out a little bit sooner than boys, and, programs, and you keep bringing up communication, because I know that's a huge piece when it comes to communicating with kids, but also the parents and understanding the program and where you're headed. What are you seeing coaches are maybe not doing as well as they should when it comes to communicating, either with girls or boys, or just as an overall broad stroke with kids? Is there a piece that's missing or something that they should be focusing in on?
I think just the understanding that some of these things which make us make assumptions as to how we work with boys and girls and what we expect is affected by culture, the socioeconomic status, our general mentality, day-to-day mentality, thinking that when you have a boy, they're more physically capable than girls. And yet this is just because of how we start them off and when we start them off. and what
Right.
we start them off with. So this is what I think is something that we need to look at: the when, what, how, So if we look at that combination, then maybe girls will be a lot more athletic by the age of 8, just like boys. And that would help us to improve the levels of not just girls, but boys too, because also understanding how to communicate with boys. Some boys stop taking part in certain sports because we don't understand them. They maybe need to be communicated to differently. So again, it's just about understanding the culture and socioeconomic status of each kid, each group of people that you work with, the environment in which you work, and finding the best way to get the best out of each individual.
Yeah, I think, and a lot of times you think that, I've heard it several times where people think kids are like little adults, and they're actually not. They're little kids, and trying to understand kids themselves, but also then understanding, like you said, is every child, what motivates them and what makes them tick is different than the next. And they can't be working with 8 or 10 kids at a time and feeling like you're commanding that attention because you've grouped them all together. Each child needs something a little bit different, even in those large groups.
Yeah, and it kind of brings down to the fact that coaching has become a lot more, when you're organizing your sessions, it's become a lot more understanding the people that you're working with. If you're going back to the theory of player-centered coaching, so you have to understand the kids you're working with in order to know what kind of a session you're going to have, how you're going to group the kids in that session in order to be able to get the best out of each person. Because at that age, they learn a lot from each other, and the environment around each other is what helps them grow to also be better people. Because if we expect that we should have a lot more managers in future being able to accept that there are a lot more girls in sport, they have to start understanding from an early age that girls should be having just as much opportunities as boys. I don't know if you understand what I mean.
Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly. So if they understand that from an early age, and it takes us to explain that to them, to show them and to put them in that environment, we have to start that from an early age.
Yeah, and you mentioned the player-centered programs, and I think there's probably not enough coaches out there that really understand the difference. And the evolution program that Mike Barrows put together is one of those, where it's probably only real program out there that's child-centered. So if you had to explain it maybe in just a few sentences to a coach that around the world that's running a program, what does that mean to have a real child-centered program as opposed to what we normally see?
I feel like the most important thing is fun. If they enjoy themselves, it's the most, they will come back again and play and find fun ways of competing with each other. At that age, if you can understand what drives girls, do they like to talk more? Do they want to be explained to things at length? Do they love colors? Do they love jokes? At that age, they need to have fun, and you need to know what they like. And I think understanding girls and boys and knowing how to be able to put them in the same group, but to be able to achieve individual satisfaction for each one of them, I feel is the basis. So fun, understanding, communicating, and building an environment that involves and includes all of them, so that we don't have one child at the side of the fence. Or it's
right.
Understanding what makes that child at the side of the fence, what motivates her, and then finding a way to get her to be part of the group by finding what motivates her.
Yeah.
That's like it to explain longer and things like those.
Yeah, and that's exactly what you're saying is, I don't think there's enough coaches that really understand how deep we have to get into understanding kids. It's not just about teaching them a forehand or a backhand or how to serve, because you mentioned it. Even if you broke down the word fun means so much, or it's so different to each child, right? Fun to one could just be hitting balls, where fun to another child would be the competition side of it, where another one, the fun part is just showing up and being with friends. And understanding those is how your programs become successful.
Exactly. Just understanding that boys will love the competitive, maybe a lot more matches, and girls would also love to play the matches, but maybe you'll want to make it a lot more friendly, a lot more cooperative, things like those. I feel is what we need to do as coaches a lot more.
Right on. I can't agree more. So let's talk real quickly. I know your time's valuable, but I know everybody probably wants to know a little bit about your experience with Davis Cup and Fed Cup. I know that's really something that, from a coach's standpoint, is probably everybody's watching this going, wow, that would be really cool. And you've done a lot of great stuff. I think with Davis Cup, you got them to qualify for Group 2 in 2018, 2019. You've worked with the Fed Cup. At least in the last several years. So what do you see? What was so fun about that, for instance? What was something, what are maybe some of the memories you had from that? But then what are also some of the things that you're seeing from the development side of players at that level that coaches need to be working on at the younger age of 8, 10, 12 years old, so that the kids can get to that level?
As to the first question, the best thing is tennis, as much as it's an individual sport, the teamwork in these events was just the best. The team environment around Davis Cup and Fed Cup was amazing, all the way from the people organizing the teams, to the players, to the crowd, to the support we got from the country. It was amazing. For me, that's the one time that we have experienced people coming together as a small, big village to achieve something. Cool. So that for me was the best thing, and it was the best feeling throughout. As for what areas that I feel we need to improve on, is the understanding that when we work with kids, it's a long-term development project. So focusing on fundamentals is really important. And this is why being involved in not just hitting forehands and backhands and doing a lot more skill stuff with them is really key, because we are developing somebody who should hopefully enjoy themselves enough to stay in the sport for longer. When we hand them over to the next group of people, they should have already have the basics of development that the next group can pick up when we are now training to train, or training to compete, or training to win. The fundamentals had to have been set. And this is why I feel sometimes we don't take as seriously this stage of development as we should. We have to understand fundamentals are the basics. Otherwise, we start working on fundamentals when we are now supposed to be training to train, or training to compete. And that takes away from quality of what we can then work on. And I see that a lot. For us, it's an area we have to improve on, not just something that we talk about, but we have to improve on. I have to improve on it. I have to think a lot about it, more than I used to. Right. Now, because I've seen how it keeps us from performing at our best at an intermediate and advanced stage. So when we are now training to compete, or trying to train to win, we are still trying to work on things that we should have been working on much earlier. So that's why I'm saying this is so important. That what we're doing in this conference, I think, is the best stage for understanding the first, second stages of the long-term athlete development.
Yeah, I agree. This is going to be a really, really neat conference. I think those that haven't, that every once in a while do a conference, this is a conference like no other. I mean, we're getting expert coaches around the world like you and Judy Murray and some of these others, Craig Jones and so forth, all at one conference, and it's all focused on kids development at all the different areas. So you're not having to worry about, we're going to deal with cardio tennis and adult tennis, and then let me find those little nuggets of kids. But if you work with kids at any level, if you have a program, you have to do and register for this conference for sure. And come and listen to presentations like yours.
Definitely. I think the best thing for me is getting an opportunity to learn from all the other people, because I am really looking forward to that as an individual, for my own personal growth, and to help me understand working with kids is the most amazing thing, and understanding how to work with them is even better. Getting them to come out at their best every day and understand what makes them enjoy themselves and have fun and what motivates each and every one of them. These are some of the things at this conference I feel I'm going to learn a lot from all the other coaches. So I'm definitely looking forward to it.
Yeah, I can't either. This is where we all get to learn, right? Even those that are presenting are learning, and those of us that are new to the industry. I've been in it for over 30 years, but those that are new to the industry, those of us have been around forever. It's always about learning. You know, we're always going to pick up something new. I've picked up something new from you already. So they've got to get involved. They've got to register. Go to conference.evolve9.com to register. August 14th to the 23rd. All sorts of great information. But Rosemary, I can't thank you enough for spending some time with us and picking your brain and getting a little bit of insight on your presentation.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity. I'm looking forward to it.
We can't wait either. And thanks again, and we will see you soon.
Thank you. You too.